Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with some more of the Great War, and we are on to week 212. A resounding victory. German morale plummets. We are truly in the end game now for this series. It's so weird to say. It is so weird to say. Something that I have essentially been doing for half of the time that I have been doing YouTube. 2 years, I think, roughly. A little, it's gonna, I think, turn out to be roughly a little bit over 2 years of watching this series. And July 1st, 2024 is my 4th year anniversary for those that care. I don't do annual videos. I did the first year, and then I think the second didn't, too lazy. Or no, maybe I did do one the second year. Well, I can't remember. It doesn't fucking matter. Before I dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I'd love to join the Discord and follow me over Twitch. And please do go check out the gaming channel here on YouTube. So, yeah, with all that said, let's go ahead and dive right in. I'm trying to contain my yapping.
For 4 years, when the Allies have mounted attacks on the Western Front, they've been huge offensives that tried to batter their way through big chunks of the German defenses. But not anymore. Now, the Allies have adopted a new strategy.
About damn time. Took them on that long enough. Enough death. See, that's the one thing, like, we've talked about before how, right, these people have access to new technologies to them, and so we can give them some leeway with not developing, like, that one strategy of combining air, tank, artillery, and infantry together, right? We can give them some slack for that because they've never had access to all of those things before. But what we can't give them slack for is how long it takes them to change their strategies from sending a bunch of men to die, right? Like, they would keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. It's like, whereas the Germans were really the only ones, I felt like, for most of this war, that actually seemed to try and do new strategies here and there. And that might be due to that the Germans don't have as much access to manpower. Like, I mean, the Germans, as was pointed out, I think in one of the last couple weeks, the Germans do have access to more manpower than the French, but the British have more access to manpower than both the Germans and French. Just in India alone if they wanted. But right, it's still like, and they're still not. I don't know. It just why? Why just send men to die?
I'm Indy Nidell. Welcome to the Great War. Last week saw the Black Day of the German Army, August 8th, when the Battle of Amiens kicked off and the Allies smashed through the German lines. By the end of the week, though, the Germans had managed to slow the tide. The Allies were also successful at Al-Mudawara on the Palestine front, and Baku defended itself from Ottomans after British forces arrived. Here's what followed. The Battle of Amiens ended on the 12th. See, British planes could still not destroy the Somme bridges, and the Allied advance turned into a crawl when they reached the old defenses, where the reinforced Germans had more cover. By the 11th, the Germans were launching counteroffensives. The British had brought up their heavy guns, sure, but it would take time to locate the new German positions, and the Germans now had more divisions in the lines than the Allies did. And from 342 battle tanks on the 8th, the Allies could only field 85 on the 10th, and just 35 on the 11th.
Oh.
The offensive was over. For 4 days of fighting, the Allies took 44,000 casualties. The Germans might have lost as many as 70,000 casualties and lost 28,873 prisoners. Thing is, they actually lost more territory and more men in the Second Battle of the Marne last month, but this, coming on the heels of that, is a big morale crusher. OHL, German High Command, was most concerned about the number of soldiers not just surrendering, but doing so in large numbers without even really fighting. Also, and a big also, the Allied air superiority meant they could conceal preparations for attacks. They didn't need any preliminary artillery barrages, and they seemed to be able to prepare attacks quicker than the Germans could. Apparently, German Quartermaster General Erich Ludendorff offered Chief of Staff Paul von Hindenburg his resignation, but still, even on the 10th, he rejected strategic planner Fritz von Lossberg's advice to pull back to the Hindenburg Line, which would shorten the German defenses and they'd be a ton stronger. He ordered, "Not a foot of soil to be abandoned without determined struggle." Funny, isn't it? Remember when Erich von Falkenhayn was running the show a couple years ago and had that same philosophy at Verdun? And then Hindenburg and Ludendorff took over and thought, that's not such a great idea. Well, here we are, back there again. Ludendorff told the new foreign minister Paul von Hintze on the 13th that the only hope was to wear down the Allies with defensive fighting. So it would kind of make a lot more sense had he moved to a shorter and better defensive line. Ferdinand Foch, in overall command of the Allies, was actually afraid the Germans might retreat all the way to the Antwerp-Namur-Strasbourg line. That was only half the length of the current German lines. Imagine how much easier that would be to defend. Hintze told the Crown Council that time was not on their side, and the Kaiser and the High Command agreed, but they thought they needed the perfect time to come to some sort of understanding with the Allies and would wait until after the next success on the Western Front. But since they didn't have any offensive plans for the Western Front, they basically decided to not decide yet.
Oh my God.
They then told Austro-Hungarian Chief of Staff Ars von Strassenberg that now was not the time to begin negotiations. But the Allies were doing something new. Instead of hammering on one place again and again, they were doing a bunch of small offensives in quick succession all over the front. Just this week, the French captured Lassigny Massif, and the British crossed the River Anker to Thiepval Wood. There were, of course, hitches with how to proceed with this plan of multiple attacks. Rawlinson had always envisaged the battle as limited, and on the 11th, he persuaded Haig to halt it. Foch, in contrast,
Haig agreed to halting an assault instead of just sending tens of thousands of young men to die? Character development.
Wanted Haig to resume as early as August 15th. But Currie induced Rawlinson to prevail on Haig again to desist. On the 14th, Haig told Foch he was ending the offensive. Foch flatly disagreed, but partly because the French First Army was running out of ammunition, Foch gave way. Think that through for a second, okay? It's complicated, but think it through for a second. When have we seen Sir Douglas Haig listen to people and quit while he was ahead?
Yes.
Like never. That's a new one. Actually, when Haig had told Rawlinson that Foch wanted him to push on, Rawlinson showed Haig a message from Arthur Currie that said such a push would be really costly, and then told Haig the men had done enough. He ended by asking Haig, "Are you commanding the British Army, or is Marshal Foch?"
So that's really all you had to say to him, and that would have gotten him to stop. Just, you know what? That makes sense. That adds up. Attack his pride with that kind of question. Yep, that would get him to stop. Why didn't we think of it sooner?
Haig then reminded Foch that his powers of command over the Allied forces were wide, but not infinite. "I spoke to Foch quite straightly and let him understand that I was responsible to my government and fellow citizens for the handling of the British forces."
But you're not responsible for, the death and countless deaths from a couple years ago, are you? And then you would never probably accept responsibility for ceaseless violence. Never. You're a military general.
Haig had happily discovered, though, that the appointment of Ferdinand Foch to overall command kept British Prime Minister David Lloyd George off his own back. This was not, though, keeping Lloyd George from messing with military affairs. For example, on the 12th, American Commander John Pershing went to Haig's headquarters with a complaint. Lloyd George had been trying to use the British ambassador to get hold of the U.S. War Department through the State Department to fix it so the 5 U.S. divisions now training with the British Army would remain with them for field actions. This did not work, but it did not help the already strained relations between Haig and Lloyd George. The thing is, while that sort of back-dealing could, obviously, mess up the relations between generals, it did no such thing to Pershing and Haig, who got on great and always spoke directly and openly to each other. So Haig told
What?
Pershing that since the British trained and equipped those 5 divisions, they should get some return on their investment. Pershing agreed and said he just wanted them when the current fighting was over. As it turned out, the 33rd, 78th, and 80th divisions were sent to the American First Army. But the 27th and 30th actually remained and fought with the British Army for the rest of the war. But the Allies were moving troops all over. There was news from the Allied Expeditionary Force to Vladivostok this week. Japanese General Otani, commanding the expedition, arrived there the 16th. Also, the arrival of American troops begins at the end of the week. Diplomatic relations between the U.S. and the Russian Bolshevik government were severed this week as well.
Dun, dun, dun.
If you're wondering what was going on in Soviet Russia itself, here's a quote about that from Martin Gilbert. That month, the struggle for power in Moscow reached a climax when social revolutionaries who wanted the war with Germany renewed wounded Lenin and murdered 2 of his closest colleagues. The Bolshevik response was to carry out reprisals on a massive scale. Stalin, sent to the Volga city of Tsaritsyn, conducted a ferocious Red Terror.
No way,
Systematic
Stalin?
mass
He would
terror
never do that.
against the bourgeoisie and its agents was how Stalin himself described it in a telegram to Moscow. Later, in his honor, the city was to bear the name of Stalingrad, but the terror was not forgotten. It must have been seriously depressing to live in Russia this month. But even further south,
Just that month? I feel like Russia's kind of depressing all the time.
the people in the Caucasus were taking a hit in morale. By now, the British troops that were going to arrive in Baku had arrived in Baku, and it was not 30,000 of them. It was part of a single brigade, 3 battalions, a field battery, and 3 armored cars under Major General Lionel Dunsterville. The people of Baku thought that the mighty British army was coming to defend them from the Ottomans, but the British only sent this force to help organize the local defenses. So the people of Baku suddenly woke up to their rather dire situation. And with that, I'll end the week. With a few advances still in the west, even though the Germans stopped last week's big one. New arrivals in Vladivostok and hard times in Moscow and on the Volga. Also this week, the British recognized Czechoslovakia as an allied nation, and that nation declares war on Germany. And here's an interesting side note from Martin Gilbert.
It declares war on Germany, but it doesn't declare war on Austria-Hungary? Make that make sense.
That I had nowhere else to put. Winston Churchill, who represented Britain on the Inter-Allied Munitions Council, wrote that though the Germans had a far larger supply of mustard gas in 1918, the Allies were catching up daily. Also, although the accidentally burned or blistered at the factories exceeded 100% of the staff every 3 months, volunteers were never lacking.
What?
Interesting how it is with Haig and Ludendorff. Ludendorff now demanding exactly what he was horrified of when Falkenhayn was doing it 2 years ago. Haig listening to his subordinates.
I just love that statement. Haig listening.
Taking their advice. It's like we've come around in a circle. And the new Allied strategy is working so far, even though it's only been a short while. And it has Ludendorff freaked out, that's for sure. And the one thing he must absolutely do over the next few weeks to avoid mistakes, to avoid defeat, is remain cool.
Don't think that's going to happen.
If you'd like to learn more about Sir Douglas Haig, the British commander...
Oh, well, Haig, I guess, will actually be decent now. That was a plot twist I was not expecting. And that was a resounding victory. German morale plummets. The Great War Week 212. Nothing to really add on here at the end. There wasn't too much to talk about aside from the surprise that Haig is becoming competent, maybe? That would be a plot twist to finish off the one final big plot twist to end this series. Haig becomes competent. You know, is Luigi Cadorna still alive? I want him to die. Can we just have one video where it's just like Luigi Cadorna is dead and we just party and we just celebrate like the crab rave dance? That would be a good time. But anyways, that was the Great War Week 212. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.